Dr. Jalan, thank you so much for coming over to the Indian Express.
It's a pleasure.
Dr. Jalan's recent book, India Ahead 2025 and Beyond, that's just been launched, and I thought we'd try to contextualize it to the present circumstances. Dr. Jalan has held, we all know that he has been the RBI governor for 2 terms between 97 and 2003.
That's right, yeah.
And Dr. Jalan, if you want to make any opening statements, if you want to say a few things about the book.
The main point that I've been trying to identify, that for the first time, after 1989, for the first time, we have a government with a party majority, with a majority of its own. Earlier, you may remember that there used to be talk about compulsions of politics. We can't do this, we can't do that. There are compulsions of politics and the coalitions, and that was true, in a way, that you could not take decisions which were not embedded in the past, as it were. When you could take reforms, you could do something with the rupee, or you can do something with making it freer, liberalize, and so on and so forth. But there was this issue that you can't take major political reforms, and this is the first majority government that we have in power, and the next elections are coming. So if the government decides that some hard decisions should be taken which are in the interest of the country from a long-run point of view, that's why it is 2025 beyond, then they can introduce it now. The elections are in May 2019. So the measures can be announced now, if they want to, political measures, economic measures, and some of the more dramatic measures I am talking about here, which is in the political terms, for example, or governance terms. And they can be implemented over a period of time. It's not something that can be implemented within 6 months. So what I'm trying to get to you essentially in the book is that we are in a very strong position today. Majority party government. If you look at our savings, domestic savings, they are among the highest in the world. Domestic savings, domestic investment, we have the power. Technology, India is the Silicon Valley type of technological reputation today. So you have capital, you have technology, we have labor, and we have the entrepreneurial spirit. Some of the best companies, some of the best corporates in the world, and so on and so forth. And if you look at our resource situation in terms of the budget, that's also very high. But what you do with the budget is the important part. That is where the expenditure is going. Why is it that you still have 250 million to 300 million people who are poor? So the high priority has to be that, and so in terms of the management of subsidies, management of food, management of nutrition, management of health, you need a lot of not just announcements and not setting up committees and setting up companies which would announce it, but you have to reduce the powers from the center to the states. And one of the examples that I have given in the book.
Dr. Jalan, one of the things which you talk about in the book is about the headline effect of the currency, where currency falls to a historic low, currency slides, the rupee slides. I think if it was the case in 97, 98, the situation is no different today, where the rupee has hit almost its historic low. It's about 74, it's touching 74 or almost 75. What is but there seems to be a sense of some problem in messaging between the government of India and the Reserve Bank of India, where the markets don't seem to be believing what the government says. So in calendar year 2018, rupee has depreciated almost 14%, which is seen as very large by the government. So what is amiss here in the messaging?
No, in the messaging, I don't want to comment on the RBI and the government. in the sense that that all of us know what goes on from time to time. There may be differences, but the more important part is exactly that any policy which is difficult on the ground, for example, if you are intervening in the rupee and trying to control the rupee, then you have to spend foreign exchange. And if the market expects that the government and the RBI are not on the same zone, then they would start speculating that it won't happen, or they buy dollars that you won't succeed. So therefore there has to be a consultative system where you decide that yes, I give the power to the RBI, or I give the power to the banks, or I give the power to whoever it is to manage the rupee, to manage the NPAs, for example. NPAs are also very high. You don't have to look up. You have to hold the agency which is managing it accountable. And to hold that accountable, you have to give them the powers to manage it.
Yeah, if you can just tell us about the Asian crisis when you were at the helm at RBI. How did you kind of...
It was not me. It was we, at that particular point of time, didn't have the resources. You had sanctions from the US because of the nuclear proliferation. You had no support from other governments because of the US thing and the nuclear, and we had nuclear proliferation, etc., etc. So, and our reserves were very low at that particular point of time. Then you had the Asian crisis, and the speculation in all the journals and everywhere else was that how would you manage it? Because there was also this fear that rupee can't depreciate. And the statement made by some ministers at that time when they came to power after the elections was that rupee should be strong. And that moment we lost $2 billion out of 20 or 22. Because everybody expected that this can't be done if the Reserve Bank or the government is trying to, preserve. So the issue was that we learned by doing, as it were, RBI at that particular point of time. But everybody expected that you would intervene at, say, 40, round number. It goes to 39. So the people start buying. That RBI would intervene at 40, so we can borrow from you and buy dollars, and I will get 1 rupee more or whatever it is. So one learning was that don't intervene at a round number. You intervene when the market is nervous. And the second most important point was some of this intervention would be indirect. So it was learning by doing, and over a period of time then we were able to manage.
So what is it about a strong currency? Like, I think successive governments have kind of always looked at currency as some indicator of...
No, I think that we should get away from that part. That strong, weak, these are words which I think you should avoid in terms of currency. You have to talk about, is it real effective exchange rate? What is the real effective exchange rate? Is that, supposing my inflation is 8%, rupee is 8% rising, rupee's value is going down, then if the rupee's value is going down in terms of goods and services, then you can, there should be depreciation of the exchange rate because your exports then can take place rather than favoring imports. So what I am trying to get to you is that all these things, if you say strong, weak, so everybody wants to be strong, that my newspaper is strong, rather than that I am weak. So but you have to look at exchange rate as nothing else but a medium of exchange with foreign currencies. And if it is a medium of exchange with foreign currencies, the only criteria as students of economics or as writers or as journalists we can use is that is it real effective exchange rate, that is inflation adjusted exchange rate, is it stable or is it not stable? And what is it that we are doing about inflation? What is it that we are doing about exchange rate management so that it doesn't go out of hand, as is the case now, for example, in many countries in Latin America, at that time also, Africa and so on.
In the context that we have a government with a clear majority, which we have never seen for the last 30 years, it can push through reforms, like it has pushed through
absolutely.
GST, it has pushed through the insolvency and bankruptcy code, things like that. But such governments can also ram through a demonetization, or what is in the domain of controversy today is the Rafale deal, which what mechanism was utilized to kind of arrive at a decision on Rafale. Do you see a flip side to a majoritarian government, or say for instance demonetization, was it a good move?
No, let me not comment on this move or that move. You see, we all know, now that there is a fair amount of consensus that demonetization was not a good move. And, I had also said something at that time. But the main issue that we have to concentrate on, and you raised the issue of corruption. So the corruption is a multi-layered problem in India. It is not that the central government, and it must be said to the credit of the government of India, that with DBT and with goods and services tax, etc., that there has been the corruption at the ministerial level or at the central level has certainly reduced. Because you can't reduce corruption fundamentally unless you make administrative reforms of a type which do not require 30 approvals for you to be able to buy a TV, your institution. So what I'm saying is that we have to simplify the procedures. You lay down the rules. And if you are borrowing from the banks to buy something, then the banks can decide. But why does the central government come into that picture? And why do powers of the state, what the state should do or what the wages should be in Gujarat or Maharashtra should be decided by the center? You think about it, in a large country like ours, that we have to transfer powers of regulation and maintenance to the state level, to district level, and hold them accountable. For example, if you say I want to build roads, now today the central government would decide where the roads would be built because it is our money at the center, how it would be built, who would build. Now, supposing you left it to the states and said that I have got so many thousand crores, 4,000 crores, 5,000, 10,000 crores, and I am giving in advance to all these states of 200 crores. And once you spend 200 crores, and we can have a meeting with all the states, which is roads, how much does it cost? In different states it will cost different. And you can lay down a certain, norm, that if you, after you have spent this at this rate, then you will get more money. But we don't have bulk transfers with which you can try and build roads or not build roads or transfer it to somebody else and something. So I think you need a methodology, you need a method whereby all the taxes can be raised by the center. But the use of these taxes is decentralized, based on performance and other formula, population and so on and so forth.
So on the appointment of political persons or people with political orientation on the central board or the regional boards of the RBI, what are your views on that, and would that trend worry you as a former central bank governor?
I can't talk on the record.
This is fine, but say, does RBI have any say in government appointments to the board?
No, it's not a question of having a say. You know, it's not that I have got 20% vote and you have got 30% vote, therefore you get elected. It's not a say, it's consultative process. And in the RBI or in any board which is responsible to the government and which is where some public service is being performed, it's most important that the functionality of the executive of that company or of that corporate or of that institution is delivering the best services that is feasible within the amount of money that the public is giving them.
Dr. Jalan, I think the RBI's role has now become very, transparent. They just have a single mandate of inflation targeting. Do you think it's a very narrow kind of mandate? Do you think it needs widening? Like for example, the rupee. Should the RBI be bothered about the external value of the rupee also, as opposed to just the internal value? Like I think there was a lot of debate after the latest MPC meeting. That RBI said, look, inflation is not increasing, so I won't increase the repo rate. But yes, I will. Whatever. I change my monetary policy stance. Whereas there are others who believe that they should look at multiple variables, not just inflation. They should also look at growth. They should look at exchange rate. Do you think this inflation targeting, the single-minded thing, has that been a good move?
No, but I'll talk personally here because at that time I had also, when I was in the RBI, that I don't believe in targeting. You see that it depends on what the situation is, what my priorities are, and then we take into account those priorities depending on what is happening then. And for example, if you have a drought, and if I have a target, how do I handle it? If you have say this trade war, and I have an exchange rate target, how do I handle that? You see what I mean? I mean that in the sense that you have to take into account all the factors which are relevant, then take a position which is in the public interest to the extent that you can take it.
So, do you think inflation targeting was a bad move?
No, I don't want to say good or bad.
Because it's been...
But what I am saying is that in terms of policy, all of us want low inflation. Of that there can be no doubt. But how does, for an ordinary Indian or for any other public servant, matter whether it is 6.2 or 6? I am not commenting on whether the target should be there in this particular case or not there, but what I am simply saying is that if something requires to be done in the public interest, you do it and then you are accountable.
The government has tried for a number of years to reform and resurrect them, but year after year we find that they fall back into the suboptimal territory. And recent fraud at Punjab National Bank exposed the fault lines in the public sector banks. In light of that, RBI Governor Urjit Patel has asked for more powers to regulate public sector banks, like the power to fire CMDs or to enforce an amalgamation among public sector banks or to wind up. The government hasn't been very receptive. You have been a governor for long. What do you think is the solution to these ills, privatization or granting more powers to the RBI? And what is your overall assessment of the sector, especially the state-owned portion of it?
No, on that there can be no two views. I mean, obviously, if MPs are 11%, 12% public sector banks, then this is not something which is justifiable. If you have public sector banks going bankrupt or going into a crisis, that's not justifiable. Because you should be able to take action which is prior to that happening. Unless there is a war or something like that, that's a different issue altogether. So what I'm saying is that these issues have to be handled by the agencies concerned and with the approval of whichever is the governing authority.
You read the IL&FS crisis overall. I mean, the entire episode, how it
the IL&FS went into the crisis when refinance was not available for the long term. It was raising through CPs. Is there a systemic issue in infrastructure financing, and how is your overall reading of governments or the agency's handling of the entire matter?
But I don't want to comment specifically on IL&FS, but if something like this has happened, then it's a matter of great concern about both the aspects. One about the internal management of the institution, which is now being examined anyway, and the second is of the regulatory authority, of why was it allowed to develop to a point where this kind of a crisis happened. And thank God that it hasn't spread around. But if you had a Lehman kind of a crisis, then you can see what could have happened to our system, financial system also.
Dr. Jalan, I want to ask a general question. See, you were a policy maker during very difficult times, right from the economic reforms to Pokhran to Asian crisis. We hardly had any reserves. There was nothing. I mean, India was nothing. Compared to that, don't you think today's policymakers enjoy a luxury? I mean, in terms of whether it is foreign exchange, whether it is food reserves, all those traditional constraints no longer exist. Do you think that the standard of our policymakers generally has come down? I'm just asking because I think the kind of crisis which you people handled during the 90s, there was nothing, we had nothing, and if you can just take us through that period, and compare it with now. I'm asking as a general question, I'm not saying that,
If you are comparing, then you also then you also think about why is it that we are so strong today. We must have done something right at the political level, at the administrative level, at the governance level. So, what I am saying is that at the macro level, we have been extremely resourceful and fundamentally strong with our skilled manpower, with media, free media, with free democracy, with accountability. That is, so that those are that is the big picture about India.
How far have we moved in that in terms of ensuring the three things that, or no disruptions in capital account, or monetary policy independence and exchange rate stability? How has managed float helped us? And do you think that we can move ahead on capital account convertibility in the coming?
No, but that is, you see, these are two separate issues altogether. That capital account convertibility is a totally different issue. And, that is in terms of the inflows. It is a very good thing from our point of view, provided we have the resources and provided we know what that is doing, and there is a regulatory system which ensures that it is fast and fair. But if you think about the outflow of money, any loan that we take must be such that we are able to service it. And there is a limit to that. Therefore, the government or the RBI or the banks have to be extremely, what you might say, cautious to make sure that whatever we owe, either by way of foreign exchange loans or in terms of domestic loans or domestic liabilities, is manageable by that public institution.
Sir, a couple of things in the current environment on the economy that worry you, and maybe two things that you're hopeful about.
No, that so far as the worrying part is concerned, it is certainly worrying in terms of demand and supply of credit, the gap between the two. That is certainly worrying, and because that means that in terms of investments and in terms of total amount of growth prospects that we have today, we are not able to realize our full potential. That is the part in terms of worry. And your second question was, what is my hope? What is my hope essentially is that what I have said, my hope is that we would take measures today which make it possible for India not only to be one of the fastest growing countries, but one of the countries with complete poverty alleviation within a defined period. And they should be held accountable. We should ask an annual plan, and which can be revised if there is a crisis of some kind, security crisis or something, or drought or something. But we have to, as people, we can monitor that part. So my hope is that we can achieve what needs to be achieved. And the biggest task today is, to my mind, poverty alleviation, and not only in terms of absolute numbers, but also in terms of provision of all the basic services to the people. Health-wise, we've introduced lots of schemes, but on health, on nutrition, on education, we have made a lot of progress. But we have to give ourselves a timeline to do 100, not 84.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jalan, for your time.
A pleasure.